Welcome to Our College Your Voices. I'm your host, Kara Monroe. At the college's One Summit earlier this year, we had many presentations that a lot of folks came to me after One Summit and said that we just needed to have these as podcast episodes. And so this is the first in what will likely be a series of episodes, bringing to you several of the One Summit presentations. And I'm starting with my colleagues and also friends, Chad Bolser and Stacy Atkinson. Chad and Stacy, hello.
I'm just glad that we got to be in the friend category because
You
I think
are.
that there's
Me
a
too,
chance. There's a chance that
After this, we won't be.
Yeah, I think that we definitely go onto that line, and at times we go over that line where we get
you do
X'd
sometimes.
out of the friend.
You do.
You do.
Yeah.
Not
yeah.
we, you.
Yeah. So I've already lost control. And this is actually the episode that I told several people I might consider scripting, even though we don't usually do scripted podcasts. So I'm going to try to get us back on track here. So would you each tell me a little bit about what your role is here at the college? Stacy, I'm going to have you go first because you've been a guest on the podcast before.
So I currently serve as chancellor for the Richmond campus and Simplex trainer for Simplex 1 and working through Simplex 2 right now.
Excellent. And Chad?
I'm the vice president of operations for the southern campuses of the state, and I am a trainer for Simplex 1 and 2 and do some coaching along the way.
Excellent. Welcome to the podcast, both of you. And my concern with this podcast is I hate when I laugh in the podcast. And I know I'm going to laugh a lot today. So we're all just going to work together through this whole thing. So I'm going to ask the two of you, first of all, just to talk about why you put together the presentation that you did for One Summit.
So we decided as a training team that it was time to share our experiences. Chad and I had the luxury of working together on the Richmond campus, and it was no secret that if you worked on Richmond campus and you knew Chad and I that you were going to deal with Simplex somehow. So we had the luxury for 2 years to embed Simplex in all that we did. And we put a presentation together to share the experiences that we had and sort of teach people that they don't have to spend 6 hours or 2 days and use the wheel from steps 1 through 8 for Simplex if you've been through training. And we just talked about our experiences in that realm.
Yeah, I think for both of us, and Simplex has been such a dramatic change for our careers. I know for me personally, that transition for that process has made a huge difference. I would say that going through the trainings one and 2 is one of those points where you look back in your career and say that made a difference. And so I think one of the things that as we've gone through lifting up that program, standing up that program, trying to infuse it in all parts of the organization, we took a look as that kind of leadership group and said, how do we do that? We actually had a Simplex on Simplex. And doing that, we said, we need to tell our story better. And I think that we have not done that. We've utilized the process. And what better way than to have a period of time where you can explain how those things actually happen on your campus.
So you two started working together so closely on the Richmond campus. So talk about the change as campus leaders. At that time, you were chancellor and vice chancellor for academic affairs. Talk about the change that you saw on campus through the use of Simplex. And Chad, I think you even started maybe a little bit before Stacy joined your campus too.
Yeah, I would actually say that that Stacy and I's relationship actually starts with the introduction of Simplex into the organization, and we co-facilitated kind of randomly got the opportunity to do that. And because of that, I think we were like-minded enough to say, you know what? We have a tendency to push forward an idea and you like it or like it. And we'd like for you to get along.
That's the most accurate thing you've ever said, by the way.
Right. And so when you do that, I think one of the things that this process allows is for you to step back and to utilize the process to help you get a better understanding of what the problem is you're trying to solve. And so Stacy and I, when she came to the Richmond campus, it made a lot of sense for us to be able to expand that process and to utilize it in places that people do not think about Simplex being used. Most people if you've been around the training at all, or you've been in part of the process, believe that you're going to have 15 people in a room for 6 hours. You're going to have 8 steps in which you're going to do this, and you're going to come away, and it is a very long, arduous process. And I think what we did was said, the most important thing about Simplex is how you think. If you can train the behavior of thinking, then you have a chance to actually be creative and innovative in small spaces without it being dominated by one person.
Mm-hmm. It happened really organically. So we would be at a cabinet meeting and we'd look around and realize that we had a problem, and one of us would go get a poster pad. And it was just a benefit of both of us knowing the process and knowing how we can get to a solid answer here with buy-in. We have some examples of how we use this through cabinet. We have some examples of how I use it in academic affairs, and Chad has some examples of how he used it as chancellor. And I would say it was just that it became part of the culture very quickly for us.
So we'll come back to those examples, but I want to dig into something you said about people's concept of Simplex as this 6-hour or 2-day arduous process. And I know it's something as a training team we've talked about a lot, that it is the thinking skills, it is the planning, it is those sorts of things. One of the things I think we don't spend enough time training on is the pre-consult, which is planning your meeting. I mean, that's the really simple idea of it. So expand on that, or what are some of those other things that you think, beyond just the concept of the thinking skills, what are some of those other things that you think are those things we would use in daily life?
Yeah. So here is what I'm worst at, Kara, and Stacy knows this. And
I have the feeling we might editorialize on what you're worst at, Chad. But
so to build on what you
thank you.
Said, here's what I'm worst at in my professional career is to set up a meeting, and so I know what I want to accomplish in the meeting. And so I go in with an idea and a preconceived notion of it, and I go in to execute that idea. The pre-consult, interestingly enough, is the best way in which to run meetings. It is to plan the meeting, and not just you individually planning as the person that is in charge of the meeting, to plan the meeting and to say, you know what, this is what I want to accomplish today. So again, like it or like it,
right.
That's what we want to accomplish in the meeting. And I think even though I don't know that has changed some of my behaviors in all of the meetings that we have or that we utilize on campus, here's what I know is that when we took the time to set, and we call it a pre-consult, but it really is just a planning meeting. It is about groups of people, small groups of people saying, what is it that we want to accomplish here? What is it that we're trying to solve? And there is a process in place to allow for you to be creative and innovative and really get to where you would like to be with the process. Instead of saying, I know what I want to figure out. I know how I'm going to do it. And all I've got to do is spend the next hour and a half convincing these 7 people around the table that they need to view the world as I do. Now that's appealing. However, it is not team building. And so what I would say to you is the 3 parts of running an effective meeting: the pre-consult, the meeting, and then the debrief on the meeting. Those are so that you can plan the next effective meeting. That's just one of the things that you learn in this process to be a more effective leader and participant.
Mm-hmm. I would agree completely. What I think one of the things that came out in prepping for the presentation and in actually presenting on Simplex was the aha moment that our participants were having that, man, this really doesn't need to be 6 hours. I steered clear of Simplex because I don't have 6 hours, and 15 other people who might have really great ideas don't have 16 hours. We actually opened our presentation by challenging those in the audience to come up with 6 hours together, and they could not, which was the point. The point was it's too hard on our calendars right now. So use it as you can and use it when appropriate. And really our message was you can use it at any point, the Simplex process. But I do think that a pre-consult, in addition to planning the next Simplex meeting, is just planning a meeting.
There's an author that I like by the name of Robert Freed, who talks about your stance within it. He's on the teaching side of things, and he talks about your stance within a classroom. Like, what do you believe in? What is your stance? And one of the things that he always talked about was that when you get asked a question, the blood rushes to your head. When you plan a meeting and you want to get something, the blood rushes to your head and you get so energized by that and you want to go, go, go. Simplex is about flipping your brain to create a stance and environment that is inclusive and to allow for everybody to be heard in an equal plane. And so I think that that's creating your stance, creating who you are, creating how you want to do that. And I think spreading that message to say, we can actually do this conversationally if you'd like to, but you have to flip your brain.
Right.
And you have to make that conscious effort to do it. And so it can happen in 15 minutes, an hour, hour and a half, 6 hours if you want to.
Right.
But we can do this while we're talking to each other.
Yeah. I know all three of us have Simplexed our families and friends. And I think had it used on us or against us occasionally.
Mostly against.
As well in those situations. So you're right. We can do it conversationally and it doesn't require flip charts and dots and markers and those sorts of things. It can be, let's talk about the facts. What are they? What do we know? What do we not know? All of those sorts of things. So that's a really, really good point. As you guys did your presentation for One Summit, who was the intended audience? Who did you see? And what are we experiencing as a training team? And I could weigh in on this too, but I want to hear from you guys in terms of continuing to help Simplex flow across the campus and across the college.
Yeah, I think part of the answer for this is to say that the intent in Simplex and part of the outcome of our Simplex on Simplex is that we would like to be able to infuse that as, to use Min's words, the backbone of the organizational decision making.
Min is Min Ambassador who created the Simplex methodology.
Yes, that's right. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
So we have not yet done that. We utilize it, and I think we utilize it in different scales, but that continuum of influence is not where we would like it to be as a leadership team. And I think probably as an overall, as a college, as we look at this, it is not the backbone of our decision making. It is still programmatic in the way. It's not our default mechanism. So I think one of the things that we would like to do is to ensure that when we're taking that message out, that we're getting the frontline staff member that may run into big problems that they don't have answers for, and that the team around them needs to be able to have a process to do that, along with the campus leadership, along with the system leadership, that becomes the default mechanism for decision making and innovation when they get into complex problems. We would be honest in saying that has not happened yet. It didn't happen within the course of our presentation. The participants were not in all spaces of that continuum. And let's be honest, if we were really to dig down in this, we're at a point in time in this organization, and I think all organizations of higher education, in which we have a lot of pressure around metrics and numbers and achievement and growth, as we should. And there's an urgency to that process. The counterintuitive part of Simplex is it takes time.
Right.
It may take 90 minutes, but you want an answer in 90 seconds. It may take 6 hours and you want it in 6 seconds. However, there's a lot of research that says if you just spend a little bit more time, if you slow down the process, you're going to get better results. And I think we have yet to make that, make the argument, the convincing argument that if we do this right, this will absolutely help you in achieving the goals that you have, regardless of what department you're in, what campus you're in, what atmosphere you're in. This helps get results.
We were really excited to share our examples because, as I said earlier, this was really organic for Chad and I on the Richmond campus, and it was really well received by Chad, by the entire campus, kind of knowing that, oh, this sounds hard. I know exactly what they're going to do. They're going to gather us in a room. They're going to bring Post-it notes. They're going to bring markers. They're going to bring dots. One of us facilitators are going to be asked to come in. It just became part of our everyday norm. And I would love it if that is what happens at Ivy Tech and what happens on 18 campuses, not just Richmond. I think this was a first step for that to happen. As Chad noted, while there wasn't a tremendous abundance of leaders or campus leaders, that's just a term. There were a bunch of frontline staff and a bunch of people who were there and excited about our examples. And I'm certain that somebody left with, oh, I didn't think about that. And that was really the intent of it all. I think as a training team, we need to do better in sharing the message that it doesn't need to be so difficult and it doesn't need to be so hard. Just make it part of your practice every single day.
Yeah. And I think just to make sure that everybody that would listen to this say, well, I know Stacy and I know Chad and I know Kara, and at times you guys don't follow that process. That's right.
Very
because
true.
we absolutely are in that. We are
Still
absolutely a way in which I have an idea, and I want you to buy into it. And all I think that what we are saying and what we as a leadership team need to understand is that one summit presentation or one podcast or one of anything never does it. It's a continual repetition of an understanding and a message, and to show folks examples, specific examples of how it can work in a variety of situations. That when we do that effectively, we will get more buy-in. We will see it, because I tell people this all the time. If you want folks to buy into something, you have to show them how it makes their job better.
Mm-hmm. That's exactly
Absolutely.
right.
And
That's
until
right.
that happens, there will be resistance. It'll just be another thing. You were convinced, I was convinced along the way for whatever reason and whatever time. I don't think any of us were forced to be convinced, right?
No, not at all.
That's Simplex.
It was, yeah. So that's a way in which we can continue to say it comes at different times for different folks, and we just have to be patient and realize that there is a long game here.
So as you guys think about some of those examples, I'd love to hear some, because I know the two of you have facilitated, and I'm using facilitation as that sort of loose word for use Simplex in your leadership practices more than I think anybody else except maybe Krista Moreland. Right. So talk a little bit about some of those examples where you've really seen Simplex work and the Simplex skills work.
So they're all really special to me, but I would say that my favorite one, I was still VCAA, and Chad had this great idea to figure out how in the world the campus felt about the campus. And we went into what have we done in the past that makes us really successful? What are we doing right now? And what should we be doing in the future? And we brainstormed around a table, a couple of us campus leaders, and we thought, let's just have these modified Simplex sessions. And we did. We invited faculty and staff on campus to come to a series of 10 sessions and come and tell us what we used to do, what we do now, and what we can be doing better. And out of that was born 10, what we now call campus projects. And things like childcare expansion and moving into a county and reaching out and touching this county that's brand new to our service area, and transportation for students, and just the things that they were encountering and that they know about that we thought we knew about, which is my favorite part of Simplex, but we did not know about. So out of all of this documentation and all of this diverging and converging came these 10 campus projects that I'm really proud to say are still being worked at the Richmond campus. Simultaneous to that, I came in as chancellor and took the reins on things, and we realized that we were missing a population. This is great that we had full-time faculty and staff come in, but we were missing the voices of the students. And then we went into these modified sessions as part of my 100-day plan coming on board. how can we learn from the students? What did they experience prior? What are they experiencing right now? And what are their ideas for our campus to shine brighter? And out of that came some real similarities, some overlap, which was really good that they were faculty and staff and students sort of had that connection on some things and some areas that we can move forward on. But there were also some things that none of us thought were going to come. And I'm still in the process of documenting all those and prioritizing them and meeting with the SGA president. But there were some really great things that we hadn't thought about as a campus. I mean, I can go on forever with other examples that work, but I'll let Chad give you one.
Yeah, I think the one for me that stands out the most is traditionally towards the end of the year, campuses are presented with, it's a great thing, but it's one-time dollars.
Mm-hmm.
And one-time dollars is one of the, at least it was for me, and I don't know if it is for everyone else, but certainly when dollars are placed on your campus and the decision is, what should we do with them?
Right.
There is quite a debate.
That's right.
That takes place.
It's 10 departments.
So yeah. So I mean, just think through that.
I don't miss those conversations at all from campus.
And it's tense. And ultimately what happens is it becomes either A, the chancellor's view, or B, the whatever vice chancellor or facilities or finance or that view, whoever has the pen or whoever has the loudest voice.
That's right.
I hate it. I literally hated that. And so it took away this time where we'd get extra money for performance, and you'd go, I actually hate this discussion because people are going to leave mad.
Right,
They're going to be upset. They're not going to be unified. This isn't going to be the infusion of energy that it should be.
I left many of those conversations angry in my days on campus.
There's no doubt. I mean, and I'm certain that there are better leaders that have figured all of that out and can roll that out, and everybody is on board. But what I just felt like was none of the decisions that we had made in my 3 years prior had ever truly reflected the mood and the direction of the campus. And so we said, how about we do this? Let's bring a facilitator in. I'll be one voice along with other cabinet members who will be their voice.
Right.
And we will diverge. We will defer judgment, and then we'll converge. And from that, we will say, these are our priorities. Now, what happened out of that was what I thought was great was our leaders on our campus would go back to their people and say, I've got to go to this meeting. What's your priority? Mm-hmm. Then they would bring those in ahead of time. Mm-hmm. And so you would bring those folks would bring those priorities in. And some people would list them out. They'd have a piece of paper and they'd list out, here are the 25 things that but those were equal to my desire, which was, I think we ought to do this. That's right. So when we converged around it, and I think there were innovation ideas. I'll say this on the Richmond campus, the Innovation Fund is still one of the proudest things that I feel like our campus accomplished in 2 years. Because it was reflective of that particular time. It doesn't have to be universal. It doesn't have to be something that you carry on. At that time, we needed a way to say, we're going to be innovative. And that came out of those sessions. It never would have been thought of by one individual or two individuals. We felt like that was a really good direction. Super proud of that. And when you think about it, it didn't take us 6 hours. It took us 90 minutes or maybe 2 hours. And we brought somebody else in to facilitate, which is a great example, I think, of what can be done. That's how you spread the message, because that person, I guarantee that person was affected by watching the leadership on the campus equally participate in the process.
Mm-hmm. Yep, absolutely. As you guys think about some of the barriers, and you talked a little bit about this when you talked about your session, but I want you to go broader now. Some of the barriers to getting to Simplex as the backbone of our thinking in the organization. What are some of those, and how do we overcome them?
I think when people think of Simplex, because they're trained, they think of 8 steps, 6 hour minimum, sometimes 8. They think of 2 days. They think of a mandate that will come out of an action plan, and the reward for good work is more work. And they're going to look at an action plan and they're going to see an item and think, I cannot take this on right now. I think people will assume that out of Simplex comes additional work. And until we change that message that it'll be worth it, I think we're going to have a struggle.
Well, in my greatest attempt to reflect the Simplex voice, Kara, how do you think, as I turn the question back to you, as I turn the question back to you.
One of my worst skills, by the way, in training. I am terrible at turning the question back.
I've been waiting to do that.
Yeah.
No, I think our barrier comes from, I think, two things. Is to introduce Simplex, we train very intensely over a 2-day period. Then we go away from it. And then we come back and for those who want to continue, we train for 2 days and then we go away from it. And we see evidence of it in campuses and ways. Here's what we've yet to do. And I think that when this starts to happen, we'll start to see leaders in a variety of areas, not just campus leaders, but in a variety, utilize it as a default mechanism. When it truly becomes continuous improvement, we have yet to do that as an organization. And so I say this all the time. If you take a look at some of the things that we were trained on and some of the examples of big corporations that have really done this well, they have in their facilities, they have their maps on the wall. And we always talk about that. Hey, this map never goes away. As soon as you get done with this part, come back to this one. I bet you that offer has been made dozens and dozens of times. And rarely do we do that because it is not yet really continuous improvement. It is a way to solve a problem. When one, we know that it is a good way to get action going. It's a good way to get things approved in an organization that believes that. Hey, I have Simplex this problem, and this is what we came up with. That is I'll never forget that happening on our campus, sitting behind the chancellor's desk, and someone comes in and says, "Well, here, I have a solution for our problem. And by the way, we Simplexed it." and you go,
have you Simplexed it?
And you go,
told us first.
Okay, so you've jumped through the hoop. However, I think the magic in this, number one, is the process skills and the thinking skills and the behaviors that you want to have in that. But the second one is really in the continuous improvement. And I don't think we have yet gotten to a point where we will and can do that as an organization. Now, I would argue that we are how many years in? 3 years into an organization that is pretty big and has a variety of and this idea that probably the 6 or 7 or 8 of us that talk about this stuff on a regular basis, we say we haven't moved fast enough. I think by everybody else's outside of Ivy Tech, and by the way, that happens on, let's see, all of our issues, that we have not yet moved fast enough and are at a point that we would like to be. That actually is, we've made a lot of progress. I think anybody from the outside looking in would say, man, you guys really have done a great job in terms of that. Again, if we're going to really do that, it has to make your job better, and it has to solve those problems that are grinding at you the most on a day-to-day basis. Until we do that as a continuous improvement, we'll always not quite be where we'd like to be.
Right. Absolutely. I think one of the other things, since you did turn the question back, I will add, is we still have just a lot of misconceptions, as also happens in a really big organization where communication is always a little fragmented. And one of the biggest ones is that there are sort of rules around who can go to Simplex training and who can't. That's right. And some of those are of our own making as the coaches. When we did the Simplex on Simplex, and in some of our conversations, we've been reflecting on how do we help people understand that we want everybody to go through Simplex One? And even if you put in an application, but maybe you only selected the date that was open at that time, you know, it doesn't mean that you didn't get accepted and you'll never get in and we didn't like you and all those sorts of things. That's not true. We have 20 to 24 spots for a class, and we fill them looking at things like what campuses don't have trained people, leadership team members that we have to get trained for various
positions and roles.
But
I'll add to this that one of the other things that is a barrier. When I was 7 years old and playing baseball, my dad was my coach, and he was trying to teach us how to square around and bunt. Now, so if anybody, I know that I'm getting into the sporting world. So I've now about 3/4 of the audience has absolutely,
including me.
Anyway, the ball comes in. My dad squares around. He's showing a bunch of 7-year-olds how to bunt, and the ball hits the bat and hits him square in the eye.
Oh, poor Phil.
Phil has a black eye, and every 7-year-old that was in that experience never wanted to bunt again.
Absolutely.
My point in this is I remember some of the facilitations, especially early on, in which we were really struggling. And I think probably even today.
Bad. You mean bad.
Yeah, bad. And so my point is, when folks experience it for the first time and it's not a good experience, it's like that 7-year-old saying, hey, I'm never going to do this again.
Exactly.
We've heard it.
Yeah, and it's funny because some of the agendas that we'll pull up that we've saved from a couple years ago, I think, oh my gosh, was that bad? And this is what we did wrong, and this is what we did wrong, and this one. And so again, to a certain degree, in an organization as large as this, as quickly as we have brought it, not everybody's experience is going to be great.
Right.
They're going to have a continuum, good and bad. And what I hope is, as a leadership team or a group of folks that work on this on a continuum basis, that we will try to understand that some people have bad experiences, and we just need to keep talking about it and inviting people back and inviting them into the process, because it is good and it really does make a difference on how you think and how you make decisions.
Well, I want to thank Chad and Stacy for joining me today and talking about Simplex. We end every episode with a call to action. There are probably 50 in this episode, but just like we want to end every meeting with an action plan, we end every episode with a call to action. I don't know if that's where I got that from, but it is sort of what we do in Simplex. Maybe not directly, but it's just those thinking skills coming to life again. So the first thing is that we hope that if you had a bad Simplex experience, we know those happen from time to time, give it another shot. And if you have not gone through Simplex One training, make sure that you do apply. And just remember that we only have 20 spots and we do these about 4 times a year. We try to get folks through as fast as we can, but those are just the resources we have at the moment. As Chad said, we've stood this up very quickly. So make sure that you get in those applications and keep trying. We want you all. We just haven't figured out a way to.
It's just a matter of time.
Get more people in.
Yeah, I would definitely encourage anyone that has not been a part of Simplex One to experience that. It is, of all the trainings, I think it is the best training.
It's a great session,
because whether you want to go out and facilitate, whether you want to go out and learn more about Simplex, it's a great way to think about thinking.
And it is.
And so that sort of process. And so the call to action is anybody and everybody, and have some patience with us, but to get involved with that particular training is really a great professional development opportunity.
It is. Thank you again for joining this episode of Our College Your Voices. Again, I want to thank my guests, Stacey Atkinson and Chad Bolser. I'm your host, Kara Monroe. You can connect with me on Twitter at KNM Tweets. You can reach us by email at ourcollegeyourvoices@ivtech.edu. Leave us a voicemail at 317-572-5049. Don't forget, if you're an Ivy Tech faculty or staff member, you can join our Microsoft Teams listener community. Just open up Teams, click on the Teams icon, and go out to join a team, and you'll see the Our College Your Voices listener community there. Our website is ivtech.edu/podcast. Production assistance for this and every episode provided by Becky Campbell and Sarah Ferguson. Our podcast concept is by Matthew Pittman. The music, recording, and post-production services, of which there will be a lot of editing for this episode, were provided by Jen Edds at the Brassy Broadcasting Company. We will talk to you next time on Our College, Your Voices.